Hi guys, I'm Mike,
And I'm Ash.
and this is F1 Fanatics. So, this is our German Grand Prix full race review, and what a race it was.
Yes, I think both of the videos that have gone up since then have shown just how many talking points there were, and also the depth that I think some of these things need to be discussed right now.
And yeah, we discussed a lot in those kind of your race reaction, my driver ratings, but still, there's still more to discuss in terms of going detail. So basically, guys, in this video, what we're going to go through is we're going to show you the kind of full driver race result, go through there, we'll work our way through the kind of top three, and then I think it's just a bit of a free-for-all, see where this kind of takes us.
May end up going that way.
And we'll round off from there. So, guys, we'll put it up on the screen. So as you can see there is the full race review. We had 6 non-classified finishes. Pierre Gasly did get classified as 14th, I believe, but he didn't actually finish the race as noted in both mine and Ash's videos. But we're going to start with number 1, a fantastic drive from the Red Bull driver, Max Verstappen.
Yes, I said it in the reaction, not a perfect drive, but the most perfect out of everyone in the race weekend. And it was a case of keeping calm and keeping your head in those tricky conditions, really. But it was a fantastic drive from Max, and we can't emphasize it enough. It is that maturity that he's showing now. And
well, I did say, I think in the preview, I predicted him to win, and I said him to get a win on his 20th consecutive top 5 finish, and he went and did it.
Yes, and challenging Lewis for that coveted best in the wet, almost. I would still say that Lewis is probably
I completely
the
agree.
better
I
of the
don't
two.
think it's one race from there, because this race was almost a little bit special. It wasn't necessarily in the rain racecraft. It was who could manage the absolute carnage and chaos the best.
Yes, so
And funnily enough, the man who in previous career has caused carnage and chaos was actually the man who dealt with it the best.
but he drove fantastically. The only thing that you can really say is probably the spin and the decision to go onto the slicks. That would have been through feedback from him to the engineers as well, so it wasn't
solely Red Bull's fault. I
Yes.
think he would have heard, well, Magnussen was the first out of that bunch to do it, and he was putting in good times on it, and he actually didn't spin out, I don't believe.
not on the slicks. He didn't.
But the top ones, I think it was probably just the car.
And in
was
all
more
honesty,
powerful.
you're saying about the fact that Magnussen was putting in good lap times. He wasn't really, like, when you actually look at it, he was putting in good sectors.
Yeah.
And I think that was the problem. He put in a good first and second sector, and everyone just assumed slicks are the way to go. They didn't take that little bit of time to actually look and think of the lap as a whole.
No.
So that final sector was just so tricky on the slicks.
Just throughout the whole race,
So-
it was the wettest part of the track, and meant that being on slicks was just so difficult. Not until right at the very end, slicks were good enough to go through that section.
So I think that was the thing. It was one of those couple of fast sectors, and automatically it was human error more than anything. And the fact that at the time when that transition was made, it was drying out slightly, and you could see that definite dry part of the track.
There was that mini break in between. It had stopped raining, but they knew more rain was coming, and would that gamble pay enough? And admittedly, at the top, you've got to make gambles. So teams made gambles, and it didn't pay off.
My view in that situation is the gambles with changeable conditions are more to be made by the mid-table teams trying to get an upset. In that situation, I think the top team should almost
just
play that little bit more conservative, only because as when you look at the Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes, there is that golfing class that by playing that little bit more conservative, they're able to make up the time, especially as at that stage Leclerc was taking roughly 3 seconds a lap out of Verstappen and Bottas on fresh intermediates. So I don't know whether looking at that as more of a comparison than Magnussen would have been the better route to have been taken.
Massively so.
So
I think, probably getting back on to Max and his drive though, despite that slick moment, it was a superb drive and it was fantastic, and it excites us seeing someone other than, despite Hamilton and Bottas at times being brilliant this season, you love it when it's a bit of a mixed contest that you can't predict who's going to win. And I think I was more optimistic saying that Max would win last Thursday rather than any kind of real stature to it. The Ferraris actually over the weekend looked probably the car to beat rather than the Red Bulls competing. But yeah, the carnage unfolded and Max came out on top. Moving on to the Ferraris probably.
I think
unless you had a point.
No, I was literally just going to be saying that even with that spin, Max Verstappen was quick to say back onto the Inters and went relatively unnoticed.
Well, was that when it happened with Hamilton's first spin?
So that was with just before the Leclerc incident. He sort of just snuck in a little bit, and I think he caught Mercedes a little bit unaware with that one, which that was ultimately the pit stop that actually meant that the result for him was going to be in his favour there, because by doing that he was ahead with the safety car, and obviously with what happened with Hamilton it then meant that all of the incidents lined up for him. It's almost as if when we have a look at Silverstone and we say that the safety car timing meant that Hamilton was able to get the jump, it was that pit stop was the one that gave him that opportunity. So
and he took full advantage of that.
Definitely did.
But yeah, moving on to the Ferraris and Sebastian Vettel, sporting the Ferrari top, because I don't think you can talk about this weekend without talking about the Ferraris. In terms of, it was such a weekend, I don't even think there were massive highs, but highs with absolute disastrous lows throughout. Topping all three free practice sessions going into qualifying, with Vettel having to retire without posting a lap with a power unit thing, Leclerc looking favourite to get pole and then getting into Q3 and not being able to post a lap. Then in the race, Leclerc being the quickest car on the track before his mistake, bang into a wall, and Vettel, a superb drive that probably because of the carnage gets lost, was 20th and finished second.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to one, the start, the fact that on the first lap 6 places he gained. That's already got a sizable chunk of the gains that he made out of the way,
and it allowed him to play with the strategy a little
bit more. And then also the fact that there were so many drivers that were making mistakes or just not judging conditions correctly, that did allow for an easier progression through the field. And by no means is that taken away from Sebastian Vettel to drive, because he drove fantastically, was one of a few drivers that you can look at that for the race and say didn't actually make a mistake, which, considering how much was going on, is a rarity.
I think we have to look at it with all the criticism that Ferrari have got this season with their strategy. They absolutely got it spot on with Vettel. They didn't go in for those slicks when other people went in. I think Leclerc actually might have done.
Leclerc did, and that was what led to his incident.
Correct.
So,
but I think in terms of Vettel, but obviously with him being the favoured first driver, his strategy was nailed.
Yes. And the only prediction that I made that didn't come true was the team orders for Ferrari in favour of Leclerc. The incident sort of took the opportunity for that to come into place, took it away from us. But it was one of those where, because of things going on around him, Vettel was able to ensure that the strategy worked for him. And we say about tyre choices ultimately being with the driver, I think, and it is the fact that Vettel was one of those that didn't touch slicks until the very end, and that was the way. If you have a look at the drivers that made the most gains within the race, it was those that avoided slicks until the end. So fair play to Sebastian Vettel. One of the stats was about finishing on the podium that I gave after qualifying. Smashed it, really.
He certainly did. And I think we have to give, whether you're a Sebastian Vettel fan or not, Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel competing at the top and competing in races is good for F1, because he is a 4-time world champion. He does know how to win. He does know how to compete at the top. And his last 12 months have been bad for F1 as well as bad for Sebastian Vettel personally as well, because obviously it robbed a close title challenge last year with how he kind of crashed. So as bad as Hockenheim was for him last year, I know he didn't get the win this year, but I think that's going to boost his confidence massively, especially in his home Grand Prix and how it affected him last year.
Formula One is a confidence sport. You have confidence in the tyres, you're that little bit later on the brakes. If you've got confidence in the car, you're willing to throw it through a corner a bit more. And it is one of those where the more confidence you have, the better your performance is going to be. And when you look at his last 12 months, then looking at the mistakes that Ferrari have been making, you cannot say that Sebastian Vettel has had any confidence going you just can't see someone having confidence with that number of scenarios coming up. So to have a positive result is definitely something that we needed, especially so that going forward we can have those battles across 5 drivers.
We love that kind of recent Verstappen and Leclerc rivalry. Then if you throw kind of Vettel into the mix as well, and then if those two teams catch enough, I mean by Red Bull providing Verstappen enough to kind of get the absolute max of the car that's competing with there, and then the Ferraris continuing their progression how they have been doing, and Mercedes falling back into the pack a little bit, not advancing like the other two teams have been doing, it sets up a really fantastic second half of the season.
It does, and the good thing is when you look at the grid, and particularly that front end, you've got so many battles across there that people are wanting to see, and we're starting to see them combine. So we've had the Leclerc Verstappen, we've had a little bit of Hamilton and Verstappen. We need a bit more of that one, I think. But definitely we're starting to get it.
I love the Verstappen Leclerc battle.
We're getting Vettel and Hamilton battling, which we've had that for a number of seasons now, and it's always been something there that's stopping it. So to be able to get that back would be good. You're having Bottas and Verstappen, you've had that coming up for a little while now and just bubbling a little bit. You've got Leclerc with Hamilton as well, and the fact that Hamilton's actually, especially at the French Grand Prix, Hamilton was actually saying to Leclerc, I want you nearer the front more often. So there's a number of small pairings of battles that we're now starting to get being a group battle. So it means more unpredictability, which would be great for the sport.
And I think that's what is the only thing missing from this season being great, because I think throughout the entire season the midfield has been absolutely fantastic. The action, the rivalries. And well, I'll move on to Toro Rosso in a minute with it, because we can't not talk about Toro Rosso this weekend. And and we've just been missing that competitive at the top with there. So now that these last 3 races, we've got those battles at the top, and with Verstappen and Red Bull winning 2 out of those 3 races as well, and Hamilton winning at Silverstone, but it's still been a competitive and great race at Silverstone. I think that is what everyone's now like glued to the edge of their screens, edge of their seat stuff, and going, I've got to watch every race.
Well, one of the good things with the midfield battle has been the fact that there's no definitive, this team's top within it. It has been track dependent. We haven't had that for a little while now in F1, where it's been at the front. Last year there was a small element of it.
There was just Haas and Renault who were fighting for it.
Yeah, so having that at the front now, where we could almost say we're getting to the stage of there being that track dependency for the top 3 and that order changing. It does seem to be tracks that are temperature dependent. Mercedes will be dropping off slightly. So we've got a couple of races coming up within the season now where you can expect to see a little bit of a drop off from Mercedes. You know that the Red Bull's going to be able to compete where there's the high downforce required.
Exactly.
You've got the fact that Ferrari are able to compete when it's speed dominant. So it does mean that that battle is coming to the top, and it is one of those where, as a whole, those battles are going to start breaking through a lot more. And it does mean that more entertaining races.
Exactly. So it just makes us so excited for it. So I think probably a good point we get back to this race, because we got to keep talking about this race, because I think it was like, Austria, there's my top card. I trump your Austria with Silverstone. And then we're now going, I trump your Silverstone with Hockenheim, because that was just, it was just an absolute carnage of race, guys. And one of the big winners was Toro Rosso this weekend, and in particular, Daniel Kvyat became a new dad this weekend, and he has a 100% record of podiums while being a dad. So well done, Daniel.
Well, Christian Horner's come out and said he needs to have more kids.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I'm sorry, Christian, but they don't pop out that quickly. I'm not sure if it works for adopted kids, so it might be something that the Toro Rosso team look into.
Maybe, but we've got to just say, another driver who kept their head.
Yeah, super. And again, I think it is absolutely amazing to see who 2 drivers in Max Verstappen and Daniel Kvyat, who historically in their time in F1 have been known to have rash streaks and stuff, the maturity in their drives. And Daniel Kvyat was competing with Max Verstappen for fastest laps. The Toro Rosso.
I think even Albon at one point set the fastest lap in the race. So the performance of the car was there this weekend.
It was superb for whatever reason. I mean, Toro Rosso going, rain every race, rain every race.
Well, that was one of the other things. There were so many unknowns going into the weekend because none of the drivers have driven this year's aero spec in the wet. So as a whole, it was an aspect of unknown. But the number of rookie drivers that we had that haven't driven in the wet, I think at one point Albon was saying in one of his interviews that his team was saying to him, do you think it's ready for slicks? And he was saying, I don't know. I've never driven like it, so I don't know. I need your guidance on it. So to have that aspect to it as well, just made for a great race.
Incredible. So I think, Daniel Kvyat was absolutely superb, and I think this probably gets on to our first discussion point of the video in terms of driver of the day. And although Max and Vettel, you can make arguments for both of them being driver of the day and absolutely superb. My personal feel in that kind of Toro Rosso car that obviously has been nowhere near a podium, obviously with retirements and penalties and such, you can say there's an element of fortune to it with the rain. But I just thought Daniel Kvyat drove absolutely superb, and you saw my driver ratings, I gave him a 10 out of 10. And this is, where we first disagree, because you don't agree with that, do you, Ash?
No, for me, I would say driver of the day was actually Alexander Albon. It's one of those, everyone was saying about the progression that Vettel was going to make. And when you look at it, Albon only started 3 places ahead of him, I think it was, in the end, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. Because Lando was 19th with his power unit penalty.
Then the 2 Williams, and then Albon. So, yes, Albon didn't make up as many places as Vettel, but you expected Vettel to make up places.
That Ferrari was quick around Hockenheim.
It was. And Albon, another one, didn't lose his head, stayed quite calm and composed within there. And then obviously there is that aspect of he has never driven a Formula 1 car in the wet.
So you have to give him credit for that. It was an absolutely incredible weekend for them. And yeah, I mean, for me, Daniel Kvyat edges it because just securing that podium and both had absolutely no mistakes, absolutely flawless. I mean, you can probably look at it in terms of Kvyat started a couple of places ahead of Albon in the race, and so therefore he finished a couple of races ahead. So I think either driver, you can make a really good case for being driver of the day, because yeah, like you said, Albon for his first race,
you could make an argument for any of the top 6 game drivers of the day. Really,
he certainly could.
So it's a difficult one to pick, and there's going to be different opinions. Verstappen won driver of the day on the F1 vote. We've got a disagreement on there, so it is one of those where
you can make an argument. I mean, yeah, it was just fantastic racing from all those guys at the top, and I think that was reflected in my driver ratings in terms of, I think, no one below 6th got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all got 8 and a 10 or better in my ratings, and I think that was a fair reflection of that, because after that it was actually I think I did give Grosjean an 8 out of 10, 7th. We'll move on to Haas a little bit later on. I think we want to talk about Toro Rosso, and obviously Gasly had such a good comeback thing. He qualified well this weekend in 4th.
But the thing that we got to look at with that is Vettel and Leclerc didn't set times that were for that top 10 shootout.
He would have been 6th.
So
both Ferraris were there and cars were working to their optimum, he wouldn't have finished above 6th.
So we can look at this and say, yes, he qualified well. He qualified best of the rest, effectively, because the 2 cars that you knew would be above, there's at least 2 cars you can say would have been above him. And when you actually look at his lap time in qualifying, it wasn't that much faster than Kimi Raikkonen, because the lap time that he did actually set that was closest to Bottas was disqualified because of track limits. So it is one of those where, was his qualifying performance as good as it's been being made out to be?
So I think what we're only going to spend really kind of quick time on this, because in the kind of summer break we're going to bring out a video that kind of looks at the 2020 lineups and who we think is going to go. But I think this half season shows with Pierre Gasly, he's a naturally quick driver. He was quick at Toro Rosso, but when you go to the big team, there's a certain level of pressure that's put on you at a top team, and he's showing to me that he can't cope with that pressure.
I think looking at it, he's in a situation where Verstappen was a few years back. He needs a bit more time to mature.
I agree, but there isn't as much natural talent, I think. Verstappen showed a lot more because he was in the overtakes and he was competing. Who was his teammate? Was it
Ricardo?
Ricardo, of course it was, yeah. Ricardo, and then obviously overtook. And I don't think anyone in a realistic world, I mean, miracles can happen, sees Gasly competing on Verstappen's level.
He's not going to get to that level. It's just the maturity side of things. the improvement we've seen in Verstappen as he's matured has been incredible. I think that maturity is needed from Gasly as well.
And I think,
but he's not going to be.
If he was a driver not under pressure, I don't think he knocks his front wing and gets out of the race how he would do.
No,
I think
if that
is a driver under pressure going, I can't finish behind both Toro Rossos in this race. I have to get past it.
If that had been him in the Toro Rosso last year, he has a better finish than that.
I agree.
He would have finished. One, he would have finished that race. Two, overtakes would become a little bit easier to him because he's not having to take as many risks with the overtakes. I feel that's where he's losing confidence. He's having to take risks that he's not comfortable making and is losing confidence in his ability because of not being able to pull them off.
Yeah, massively. I think we'll literally just do, I say, a 30-second roundup of who we would replace Gasly with. And I've been mightily impressed with Daniel Kvyat since coming back in to the Toro Rosso seat this year. And I think he's matured as a driver. He had that natural pace when he was a rookie and in his early years that obviously got him the Red Bull seat initially, and then obviously was gutted. He's had to go away, he's had to look at himself and to come back and do what he's been doing this season, which has been fairly consistency and obviously the pinnacle of it with this podium. I think he's probably worth another shot, and probably in terms of a regular point scoring to get Red Bull further up the Constructors' title, I think he would be the safer bet.
I was in the camp that thought that Dan Tickton was actually going to be given the opportunity in the mid-season break, but considering that Red Bull have dropped him from their driver program, I'm thinking that the better risk for Red Bull, because changing driver lineup is a risk for them, but I think the better option going forward is Albon. I am a fan of him, and I don't think Red Bull are in a position where they can take that risk on Kvyat again and it turning out the way it has with Gasly taking that step up. So
I think if you replace them halfway, like I said, we won't get too into this, but I think you can almost go on a 6-month trial contract with Kvyat, and then if it doesn't work, you can go Alex Albon at the start of next season. So I think it's a win-win situation.
Either way, if they change driver lineup, it's gonna be one of the two Toro Rosso drivers they take. They're not gonna have an unknown, and whichever one goes in is gonna have 6 months to have that contract for next season. If they don't perform, likelihood is the other one will end up in the seat. It is one of the, you're in between a rock and a hard place when doing that change, because both have performed really well this season when you look at the car performance. So you can argue for either of them getting that step up, and you're not going to be able to guarantee. So it is one of those where second half of the season, if they take the risk, whoever has it has that half of the season to prove they can take that seat and perform. If not, the other one will likely have it, or someone completely different.
Yeah.
It's not in Red Bull's nature.
Fernando Alonso. No, that's impossible. I just want Fernando back. Please come back, Fernando. This will be a constant thing throughout the whole year. If you followed on Twitter, I'm pretty sure I average a tweet a day of please get Fernando back into a 2020 seat. It's my campaign. I'm with you, Fernando. I think probably talking about Albon, naturally it goes, we'll look at, I think, our top rookie of the day. So naturally we've spoken about Albon, he was rookie of the day in terms of that. And I think we've probably covered how exceptional his race was considering new conditions from there. But I think what's quite interesting of doing this rookie of the day is the guy who has been topping probably rookie of the day throughout the entire season out of the Albon, Giovinazzi, Russell and Norris band. I would say Norris is bottom of that list this time.
Yes, I think he didn't ever get a lap together for the whole race weekend, even in practice and qualifying. He never managed to combine all of the sectors, and it was unfortunate for him the way the failure came about, because it did limit the opportunities he had.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it was a hydraulics failure.
Yes,
For those who didn't know.
but you can't turn around and say that he had a fantastic weekend. I think it's probably the first weekend you can look at and say he's looked like a rookie in Formula One.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, what is that, round 11 or round 10 was Hockenheim?
And I think
I feel like it's 10.
I feel 10.
You can correct us if we're wrong in the comments. But to get to round 10 and that be your first race where people think, oh, he does show his rookiness there in a race that was incredibly challenging anyway.
That's the thing. First
and
time
not going out on through a rookie mistake almost.
Yeah, and first race he hasn't made it out of Q3 in Q1 in qualifying, which shows on the whole he's put laps together. Then the conditions he was in, far more experienced drivers were making mistakes that led to them their races ending, and then you've got a rookie whose retirement was due to a car failure, not an individual mistake. So can't be too harsh on him, but it is one of those where you have to say, rookie wise, he was probably
bottom of the list.
Bottom of the list for that.
I would say
this weekend.
Yeah, we probably don't need to speak about George Russell too much in terms of, again, he was relentlessly efficient, worked with what he's got. If anything, you can say he goes fixed in that third position because he finished behind Kubica, who he's been beating all season. So therefore, I think that is his barometer. In a race, if he finishes below Kubica, he's always going to be in the bottom half of that rookie of the year, rookie of the racing. Giovinazzi, I mentioned it in my driver ratings. I mean, obviously the penalty came for both Alfa Romeos, which I think we'll talk about after this. Seems a good point to put it in. But I actually thought both him and Kimi drove very good races in the Alphas.
They did, and no notable mistakes by Giovinazzi. Kimi had a little bit of an off, didn't he?
Yeah.
But showed experience. It's one of the things we've said about a number of times.
Yeah, I think Martin Brundle on commentary went, it's typical Finnish driving, isn't it? Because obviously they have the ice tracks and rallying, and obviously Kimi's big stint away from F1 was in rally driving, wasn't it?
So it was experience showed there, and the fact that he kept the car going, easy on the throttle, which meant that he wasn't getting the wheels dug into the gravel. So it was a good performance from both of them this weekend.
Yeah, I agree. And so, we'll just clear up. It seems a good point to clear up. Ash will probably be the best one to do this. So it was to do with their start, and it was to do with the talk on...
Yes, so initial reports were that there had been talk from the radio side of things. That wasn't the case. What the situation was, and I'm going to do this in really basic terms because I only understand it in basic terms, but the level of talk that was released on the start has a set period that it's allowed to gradually increase. With the Alphas, the case was that was over a longer period than is allowed within Formula One, which meant the likelihood of wheel spin off of the start was greatly reduced. So the penalties of 30 seconds were given on the simple basis that they were unable to be given 10-second stop-go penalties, which is the usual case for something along those lines.
And it was gaining an advantage, wasn't it?
Yes. So
you probably saw that advantage in the race in terms of Max and Kimi, because Kimi went straight into third at the start of the race. Admittedly, Red Bull's had an awful start in both cars, but
I think that's the way you can show that clear advantage was gained.
Mm.
The Red Bulls, both cars, a lot of wheel spin because of the weather. Alphas, not as much, and were able to get away.
I think Joe Benazzi might have overtaken Gasly as well, so
Yes.
both of them
So-
advanced.
And it was one of those that the penalty would have been the same had it been a dry race as well. And it was that it was done in line with a effective false start. And that was the way the penalty was decided on that one. As I said before we started that little discussion, basic explanation because it's basic understanding.
Brilliant. And I think now we're going to come to the part in the show where I'm going to call it Spinning in the Rain, because there was a lot of spins in this race, probably the most spins in an F1 race that I've ever seen.
Probably. Well, conditions wise, you have to go back to either Japan when we had the unfortunate incident with Jules Bianchi,
Mm-hmm.
or Jenson Button's miraculous win in Canada for the type of conditions we had race wise, and not many people judged it right.
No, so I think we had, which is amazing. So Carlos Sainz, I mentioned it, I think, in the driving rank, finished P5, and at the point of the track where so many drivers went off, so there's a drag racing kind of bit of track, isn't it, from there, and they're slick anyway, and with the water it made it extra slick with kind of no grip, and drivers...
The big issue with that is more the fact that there was no camber to it.
Yeah.
So water was just sitting there. So whereas that corner had, it's only a slight camber to it, but the water had some way of flowing. Whereas the drag track, being dead flat, meant the water just sat
in
there.
water.
And the only time it was disrupted at all, a car was either spinning through it or just driving through it with very little control.
Exactly. So I think probably to clear up for guys the understanding, so obviously your tyres are the point of contact on the surface. So therefore, when you're in the rain, the reason why grip is so low is because there is then a layer which affects the contact point of the tyres on the surface. So therefore, less grip, less control, so less speed naturally, and then that's what causes to spin, because you've got no traction control, you've got no kind of anti-lock brakes on the F1 cars. It is purely this most powerful beast of a car in the control of a driver, and if you get it slightly wrong, even in the dry, you get punished for it, but in the wet, those kind of levels of risk and margin go massively up. So yeah, back to Carlos Sainz, he was facing the wall.
Yeah, had to have a little bit of a reverse. Then came out and
He dropped to 14th.
Well, Lando Norris went past him as well, didn't he, as he came back onto track. So yes, you had that.
You had obviously the Leclerc one, which, like Vettel last year, had that painful kind of slow glide into the barrier where you're going, I know I'm out.
There's not a lot.
But
There
I
wasn't a
can't do
lot to do on
anything.
that. You had Hulkenberg.
Which,
Bear in mind, these are all in the same part of the track. The only two people who ended up retiring because of a spin that wasn't at that part of the track was Perez and Bottas. Other than that, all of the spins that resulted in retirements
were
well,
out.
actually, and spins in general, really,
Yeah.
were there.
Yeah, exactly.
So it showed, and I think that was the main thing that I was trying to get at with regards to the changing to slicks. None of the teams initially waited for a proper sector time to come in from
They
that final
also
sector.
didn't know that actually probably the first sector was okay for slicks, and even parts of the second sector, but going into that last one and those last three corners in particular, it was really wet on track and was far too thin. And then obviously, you combine that with the kind of double danger of the drag race track piece of track. that was just kind of a recipe for disaster for so many, that kind of damaged so many people, that you certainly got your money's worth if you were in that grandstand on turn
definitely.
16.
That was the seat to have, really. All of the action really was that final corner, and well, Hamilton got lucky with his incident, because had he lost it a little bit sooner, he was ending up in the exact same piece of wall as Leclerc. It was just the fact that he managed to get himself around that little bit more that meant he wasn't ended up underneath Leclerc's car, because he would have ended up lifting it, you would have thought.
He would have done. I think that probably concludes the spinning in the rain section with. So I think probably actually an honourable mention to Nico Hulkenberg, in terms of this guy has so many race starts, and he is a good driver, and he's been so consistent throughout his career and hasn't got a podium. And you're like, home Grand Prix, everything's chaos and thing. He was running in second at the time, wasn't he? I think when he went out, or he might have dropped. He might have dropped down to third or fourth. I think Bottas had overtaken him at that stage, and you then just like, every F1 fan I think is like, Nico, no, because
if there is one person on the grid that deserves a podium, it's Hulkenberg.
And you just looked, and it was so painful, because he'd recovered the initial slip onto the track, went too early, put the accelerator on too hard, he then lost it again, and then a Kimi in that situation would have just let the steering ride and go from there, but he slammed his foot on the brakes, and then that just meant the tyres were just gliding on ice, and he went
just
straight
locked
into the
up,
barrier.
and as you said, no anti-lock brakes on the car, so it was left to the elements there, and it was one of those where the pain was elongated for himself. It just nice and slowly into the barrier, and once again beached in the gravel trap.
Indeed.
That's why we want more of them in Formula 1 though.
Well, because it punishes driver error, and it's the top of motorsport, it's the top in engineering. Top drivers, you've got to be punished when you make a mistake. And that's what makes the exciting races, because you can be driving 40-45 laps perfectly, but if you make that one mistake...
Well, I think Hamilton showed that, didn't he? The first half of the race, drove it fantastically. One mistake, and you had...
So I think we'll come on to the Mercedes after, but I'm going to mention Grosjean, because he's had such a tough season, and he had a superb race weekend. Like, his pace in the practice sessions were superb. He qualified 6th, wasn't it? Obviously, like we said, it probably would have been 7th if the Ferraris had made it there, but he still got to do that, had that natural pace in the car, and he drove a really good weekend, and it was fantastic to see him finish. It was 7th in the end, wasn't it? And that was genuine 7th without the Alfa Romeo. So he was comfortably ahead of Magnussen. Magnussen only came up to 8th behind him because of the Alfa Romeo penalties. So I think that was really good for him. But you can't have a race weekend without something with Haas, and they came together again. And like I brought up in my Haas video, I cannot see this partnership in 2020.
No, I think they're at a stage now where Mercedes were with Hamilton and Rosberg. You're going to have to pick one driver.
I would compare it, I think, more realistically to a Sergio Perez Ocon one of last year. I mean, obviously they don't know the driver who's coming in, but realistically it could be Ocon.
It could be. And it is a situation where it can't continue. The talking point when you look at Haas now, pretty much every race weekend is a collision between the two drivers, or an incident between the two.
Exactly, and this weekend, luckily, it didn't pay off, because Grosjean in particular put in a lot of hard work, and in fairness, it was him that turned in and onto Magnussen. But I just look at it.
I would say Magnussen was alongside and deserved space.
Yeah, I do look at it and I do see this one as more clear cut as Grosjean's fault, where I think Magnussen, if at all, was probably more Silverstone was more Magnussen's fault if there was anyone.
One thing that does need to be said about Haas though is they really need to look at the car itself though, because Grosjean was on the old spec car through practice.
Yeah, and you've got to tear your hair out, haven't you? If you're working in the design and
they've done almost half a season, and the fastest car they've had in terms of performance is Australia spec.
Every other team on the grid upgrades have worked.
Yeah. So
they have a better car now than what they did in Australia, and Haas don't. So which is almost a miracle that they're still competing in that midfield on that Australia spec and showing how good a car it is on its basic. But yeah, you just go, just crazy, absolutely crazy. So I think probably a good time. You've got to mention Mercedes as the race that got away, and it showed that they're human, which I think is really refreshing for F1 fans, because they're not this superhuman, unbeatable force anymore.
I think it's a race that was needed.
Yeah, I mean, I think we either need extreme heat or lots of rain, and then we've got good races.
The only thing you can look at this weekend, and I said it to you before we started filming, there does now seem to be an air of inevitability, though, that Hamilton will end up winning his 6th world title.
Yeah.
To have such a poor race and to still come away with actually extending your championship lead.
Bottas should have blitzed him on points, and I think that showed. We were probably saying before, and I was probably thinking, if anything, that Bottas deserved to keep the Mercedes seat with his performances, but that weekend,
considering what's been said from Mercedes and the fact that it hasn't been he's got the seat, wasn't a race weekend he needed. And as I was saying, admittedly, through luck more than anything, because of the penalties, Hamilton has still increased his lead in the Drivers' Championship. And it was a race where, yes, had he not made mistakes, he was going to be extending that lead anyway, because you didn't see Bottas beating him. But once the incidents had happened with Hamilton, Bottas should have been thinking, this is an opportunity.
If Bottas was going to be a serious competitor, this is a rare slip up from Hamilton
that needed to be punished, and it wasn't.
And he didn't. And the only one you can say is, I mean, it would have to be an incredible, and I mean incredible, like Hungary is such a huge race, for any distant dream of this to happen, it would have to be an incredible second half of the season from Max Verstappen to maybe challenge. And I realistically look and I go, out of actual talent on the grid, Max Verstappen is the only one who can distantly dream to
I would go further and say car and driver wise, Verstappen is probably the only one that's going to be able to get close. The only thing is the fact that we have seen it on so many occasions now. Hamilton goes and has that summer break, comes back and is just immense. So it's going to take an incredible second half of the season for that gap to be closed. And I'm now at the stage of thinking that it is
beyond.
I don't see the gains being made enough for a consistent challenge.
The thing we talk about Hamilton, obviously on the Saturday, he wasn't well, and so he almost didn't drive qualifying to put the car on pole. It was almost Ocon in the car, which obviously a big story was made out of. But
I was going to say,
I
think it is one of those where Mercedes were a little bit unsure about where the performance was, and yes, he was unwell. I think they've clung to it a bit more.
Well, I saw it's been made a news story, but isn't that common practice in any team? If your driver is unwell, then your reserve driver.
That's the thing. That's the reason you have a reserve driver. The whole reason for having a reserve driver is in the situation where a driver cannot race, your reserve driver.
Yeah.
So it is one of those where it's a story of nothing, because the whole basis for Ocon being at the track is for that situation. But I think it is a situation where he would have been, he was unwell, but it's been clung to because the mistakes that were made by Hamilton in the race were uncharacteristic.
Yeah, I think rightly so. 125 years was made a really big deal of Mercedes, because that is incredible. Bar the paint job that I could have said on Friday, I didn't think was actually that great. Looked a job half done. But moving along.
Paint wise though, I thought it was okay. It was just commit.
Yeah,
do the whole thing.
I get it. It was kind of almost like a transition. They started white and then they've become the silver arrows, but
no,
it looked lost. Just go all white, kind of retro.
Commit to it and stick.
So it was a real disappointing weekend, but I feel like that flamboyancy they might have, that type of news story was they wanted everyone to be talking about Mercedes. They want to go, Hamilton was ill, but he still was on pole, type of thing, going, he's incredible, which we all know Hamilton's incredible, but you know, clearly he was still fit enough to drive that car, otherwise he wouldn't have driven that car.
Exactly. So,
but I think we saw his illness affect him in the race because, also I talked about it in midweek. There was an interesting article with Toto who was basically saying that they had to look about not doing the split strategy with drivers, and I think we talked about it in the preview, didn't we?
We did.
Of saying that's you've got to let Hamilton go his gut, and I think this race, if ever we wanted to go, hello, we're right, bing bing bing, listen to us, it was this race, because he was like, nope, I don't want to go on the slicks, I don't think this is the right tyre. Goes on the slicks, spins out, completely ruins his race, because he not only has a slow pit because they're not expecting it, they have one of the worst pits that I've ever seen Mercedes do in their entire F1 career in terms of whose tyres they were getting. There was like half intermediates on, half slicks on, then it was chaos. But also the resulting penalty of him undercutting, and I think Martin Brundle, I could see his point, but also he's made the mistake, so therefore he still has to be punished. You could say that pit stop was enough of a punishment, but if it was any other driver on the grids,
I wouldn't say the pit stop was the punishment side of things. I would say the only thing where leniency could have been shown was the fact he was limping back to the pits. It wasn't.
I think Martin Brundle said you'd rather him do that and get in the pit rather than
do another
lap with a damaged
where
car.
Safety then becomes an issue.
Yeah.
But
I said flying off the car, because it would have done.
Exactly. But I said it in the reaction. It was a stonewall penalty. It's one of those where you can't turn around and say one rule for one for another. So
exactly. And they did give him lenience which seemed like it would be a surefire penalty as well, with the delta with the safety car, because that's just stats. That is literally,
it's there. It's
numbers there. There isn't like any room for interpretation with the stewards like that. It's literally he was going too fast, and there. So I think it showed, Hamilton was affected. He wasn't quite on his A game, and it showed this weekend. It wasn't his great drive, probably his worst drive of the season, I would say.
Definitely worst drive of the season, potentially up there with one of his worst drives of his career.
Potentially, in terms of the machinery and his experience, that you go, that's in. So that probably rounds off Mercedes quite well. I think we've got to talk about it, guys. Williams, although fortuitous, and with the penalties to Alfa Romeo and obviously all the retirements in the race, if obviously all 20 cars finish that race, they're not getting anywhere near the points. But congratulations, they've got a point.
Every team's got a point. Just need George Russell to get one now.
Indeed,
He deserves
He does deserve it because I think he's been fantastic in that Williams car. But I think I sent out a tweet with it going how frustrated he must have been. But George Russell strikes me as the type of bloke that he will be so happy that the team are off that 0, because it would just be embarrassing for the team to be finish the season with no points. I mean, 1's not much better, but it at least shows you got something.
But if you have a look at every interview he has had since becoming a Williams driver, it has always been progression of the car. I don't think there's been any stage where it's been, I want to be making the progression up the grid.
Yeah, I would actually say Kubica has been the one who's more come out on a selfish front rather than George Russell has been the ultimate efficient team man. He is the team player.
And when you look at the season, you're not going to turn around and say Russell's had an awful season because he hasn't got any points so far this season.
No.
You look at it and he has had one of the better seasons because the car's not been there, but consistently beat his teammate in qualifying.
And again,
won the qualifying battle.
Finished the race.
Exactly.
What I talked about with the hards and not finishing their races in the race data, the amount of the rate that Williams are going to be able to get back into being competitive is going to be massive because they're completing race after race, no failures.
The reliability is there.
And if you've got a reliable car, I think it is so much easier to put the pace on to what we'll probably talk about in the Renault's unreliability. They are in a really bad situation, which I think will probably be quite a good one to finish on. But I think round off, Williams superb. Congratulations for that 1 point. That's great, and it is great to see Robert Kubica after all he's gone through score his first championship point on his comeback. So that is great to see. Renault's we have to talk about because I think they're in a real crossroads, and dare I say it, it may be an overreaction, but they came back into F1 to be competing at the top, and last year they only just beat Haas, and this year, I mean, I expect them to go above. I mean, obviously this race has had a massive influence on things, but they are currently 6th in the constructors' titles. McLaren are well clear of them now. Well, at least a good couple of race results away from them.
I would say that McLaren have done that now. The step that McLaren needed to make was challenging Renault and consistently beating them. This result, I think, has now got to a stage where you can see McLaren kicking on and consistently scoring points. Well, Renault, not so much because of the reliability issues.
You can see it. I mean, it's crazy because obviously McLaren have got the same engine with the Renault now, and they're managing to get so much better reliability issues out of it. But that was, I spoke about it. Now Carlos Sainz, and I think it is mainly Carlos Sainz, who's been incredibly consistent for a good number of races now. They've finished 5 out of the last 6 races in the top 6, which I think is absolutely incredible for the midfield. And like you said, it is still interchangeable in that midfield, but if anyone you can make a case who has risen to the top, it is that McLaren. But Renault now sit behind Toro Rosso in the and it was another engine failure. Admittedly, they said on commentary it was because Ricciardo was using engine 1 from the start.
It wasn't a fresh engine, so that engine is going to have done at least 4 races.
Yeah, but you also look at the other teams around them, and they've had turbocharge issues and power unit issues, but not engine issues. And again, we're talking about another season and another Renault engine failure. And they are in such a horrible place in terms of Honda with Red Bull. They've now fixed their reliability issue that they had at McLaren, because that was a really big issue for Honda in F1 when McLaren was the reliability. But now with the Red Bull, like Christian Horner said, they're exceeding expectations, but that Renault still have a superior power unit to the Honda. It is a quicker...
It's a quicker engine, but goes back to that.
If you can't finish
the race, you're not scoring points. So it doesn't matter how quick you are. If you haven't got that reliability, and if you're not finishing races, you're not getting points. So it's as simple as, until they have that engine reliability and can guarantee that Renault are going to provide an engine that is going to finish a race consistently, you can't see them really competing.
Yeah, and after a really strong Silverstone, they again look a team who are heavily track dependent, like the Romeos and the Toro Rossos, which is not where they want to be. They want to be competing more like the Red Bull. Well, they've said that is their goal, to get competing with them. And since they've said that, they've fallen further away from them. Because they weren't strong even in the dry.
I think that's the overstep, though. That's the aim, to get into that top 3 battle. But they're not anywhere near competing for that. There you go. Their progression needed to be the McLarens.
Yeah.
Get to the McLarens, compete with them consistently, get ahead of them.
Exactly.
I don't think the right mindset was Red Bull straight away.
I think realistically 2021 was probably a better one to aim to kind of get on that playing field rather than this. And they should have just really focused, rather than trying to compete speed-wise with them, with their engine being superior to Honda. They should have really just made it reliable first. And it's really worrying on a engineering point of view that this isn't like a new issue. This is consistently they're having engine reliability problems, and you have to ask, what are they doing? Don't you?
Yeah,
because it keeps happening.
It's an issue, and it's a fundamental issue, and it needs to be corrected as soon as possible. Because as we've said, if you're not finishing races, you're not getting points, and the money that they get in terms of the prize money is based on constructors. So it's as simple as, you need points. It is a case of points make prizes.
Exactly, and points make gains. Probably looking at that, I think we've probably done the best we can as a full in-depth into that. Do you have any other kind of points to raise?
No, I think we've covered everything we can in as much detail as we can.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is, yet again, we've had a good race at Hockenheim. It is a classic race circuit, and as of now, it is not on the 2020 calendar.
Not, but I would say it's a historic track that Liberty will look to secure.
I imagine so, and I actually did a Twitter poll comparing what would you rather see on the 2020 calendar, the Hockenheim Ring or the Circuit de Catalunya, and Hockenheim overwhelmingly won. It might have been because it's fresh in people's minds, but we've spoken about it before, and we've spoken about it
consistently a better
more in
race.
detail. We'll probably bring out circuits we'd like to see in the 2020 calendar.
Maybe we could look at doing a video, as we're doing our potential driver lineup for 2020. Maybe we could look at doing a video of our potential calendar.
Yeah.
And going through, and we could probably look at whether or not to bring back old tracks that have since dropped off the calendar. Look at the new tracks that are out there.
Yeah. And would you technically see Hockenheim go to then have it go through the forest, which was the preferred course, to come back in there? Well, it's an option. But right, guys, I think we've probably gone on long enough. You've probably gone,
I think it is time.
It's over. But guys, what a race that was. It was absolutely superb. F1 keeps getting better and better this season, and I cannot wait for Hungary this weekend, just to see, because it is a track that notoriously favours the Red Bull, so I want to see them competing. And like I said, it would be absolutely massive if they can get a win over the Mercedes going into the summer break to then compile on this German Grand Prix loss. That might kind of play with the mental psyche of the Mercedes team a little bit. But guys, give us a thumbs up.
Make sure to subscribe and comment. What should we do for comment that we're asking for?
Your moment of the race, or your
spin of the race.
Your spin of the race, part of the spinning in the rain section. Because we did on the drivers one, you drive the race, so yeah, spin at the race.
Spin at the
Make
race.
it a bit of fun, guys. Guys, thank you very much, and remember, keep racing.